for like 3 weeks because we had the Lunar New Year. There we go.
Yep.
And so we even have some people still missing around the table because there's like sort of like a traffic limitation to come up where we live right now for the next 6 weeks. So I'm going to be starting this thing that I've been thinking about doing forever. And I'm going to probably end up doing it for the rest of my life. And so, yeah, it's been a really heavy thing for me for the last 3 or 4 months. Ever since I did that video about, just Tom talking, I have been encumbered with this reality that my goal was to start going over the orally transmitted teachings, the record of the orally transmitted teachings, at the end of our Volume 7 of Teachings for Victory with the Risho and Kokoro, okay? So I'm going to start today, and the reason this has been so heavily perplexing me for such a long time, for like I said, 3 or 4 months. First of all, the complication is that it just happened. When I started this, I didn't know President K was about to die. Mm-hmm. And that kind of put it in a different light because I realized then after that he had actually already started to lecture on the orally transmitted teachings himself. And that has not been disseminated completely amongst the membership of the Soka Gakkai. It's still coming out for the lecturers and so forth. It's not complete. So for me to start in the middle of something, I'm not trying to say anything differently than President Kate is saying, and I'm sure that I probably won't by the time I'm finished saying, but this was a point in time when I thought I would make a couple of quick distinctions about my feelings about President Ikeda, my relationship with President Ikeda. Because I'm about to quote him, and I am his disciple. But I never, everybody here start practicing before, like, say, 1995?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, so
Except me.
Huh? Except you.
I practice.
Well, the whole point is that in my experience in the U.S., I practiced I got my Gohanzen in 1973. I consider my stopping to be 1999 when I left the SGI USA to come here. Okay, and then all the activities that I did here were not really official, as I found out after we were told they're not official. So, and then we started this thing that we do together. So, the point that I wanted to make is that in that first 27 years or so, that say from 1973 to 2000, we didn't talk that much about. Certainly, we didn't back in the early days when I started practicing, and I was practicing in the 70s, 80s, that I can recollect. I don't remember much conversation about Shakyamuni. Mm-hmm. It was all Nichiren Daishonin, okay? And I didn't remember a whole lot of conversation for those first 27 years about the Lotus Sutra as being a dynamic, important element, because it's really the Gosho that we focused on, right? Mm-hmm. So part of the issue for me was that President Ikeda was intelligent enough, had enough wisdom to perceive that if he was going to spread this throughout the world as part of his legacy of president of the Soka Gakkai, he'd have to be able to deal with the perception of Buddhists of all different schools from all different places, okay? And Nichiren Daishonin not being Shakyamuni, yet being the Buddha of Kuan-Ganjo, is a very difficult thing to explain, okay? But as my friend from last, where is this here? Yeah, Clay Hamilton caught what I said before. One of the big things for me about the Daishonin's teaching was that it was from the Daishonin. It was within the recorded history time of, I'm not going into ancientness and you know, all kinds of like before languages and translations from Sanskrit and whatever, right? It's basically from classical Chinese to the Japanese that it was being represented, and then into English by the translators that we've been able to have the good fortune to have the Soka Gakkai be so large and capable and strong that they were able to get the best of the best to do all of the literary stuff. Okay? So part of what I didn't understand was why President Ikeda started all of a sudden talking about Shakyamuni all the time. Because I mean, to tell you, I know Shakyamuni has, I'm going to say some outrageous stuff here. Okay? This is from my own Buddhahood. And may I suffer in hell if I'm so incorrect. I have full and complete respect for Shakyamuni Buddha, whoever that was. Okay? But that was a long, long time ago. And the thing that the Daishonin teaches us is really the extrapolation of Shakyamuni's teachings as they were perceived from Nagarjuna to Tzu or whatever his Nanye's teacher was, to Nanye, to Chantai, to Chang'an, and then Myolo downstream, and then from that's where Dengyo got all his stuff. So that's really where Nichiren was coming from for the most part. But I also found when I started introducing this on the internet back in 2004, before we even started having meetings, that there are a lot of other Buddhists and a lot of other Buddhist schools, and they have a lot of other opinions, and they may not have gotten all the way to the lotus and the nirvana and the perfect teaching before they stopped and decided that they liked Buddhism, and they've gotten out of it whatever they thought that they were trying to get out of it. And so I realized then that President Ikeda's big challenge was to make everything that we had been learning as lay believers match up with classical, historical, established Buddhism. All right? And that's really what President Ikeda has been doing. He's been linking the Soka Gakkai and the teachings of the Daishonin, and ultimately the teachings of the orally transmitted teaching, into the legitimate fabric of Buddhism as it relates to anything that you could talk to anybody about. I mean, has anybody ever heard of a publication called Tricycle? Tricycle. It's an English language monthly that's based on Buddhism. It's Buddhism of all kind. It's the main source for Buddhists to be able to speak about Buddhism, speak up. Yeah, it's a serious publication. President Ikeda spoke with them. President Ikeda has already given them interviews and so forth that were very cogent to whatever they were trying to say. And the key was that he was explaining it in such a fashion that they were respecting where he was coming from. And this is people that I found very difficult to get the respect of if you weren't like already locked into what they were doing. And so this is a lot of meditative people and a lot of people that are like into precepts and all the, So the key here is to understand that where I'm going to be coming from is where I've always been coming from. I'm a disciple of Daisaku Ikeda and Josei Toda and Tenesaburo Makaguchi. But first and foremost, I'm a disciple of Nichiren Daishonin, because that's all I knew. That's all I was introduced to. I didn't have to know anything about the Lotus Sutra to get all of my prayers answered and to advance in faith. I didn't have to know anything about any other form of Buddhism to get all of my prayers answered and to advance in my faith. Okay? So as this has all come along, the reason I read so much is I want people to know what these things actually say instead of hearing them interpretively referred to. And President Ikeda says a lot. The Lotus Sutra says this. We got to really understand, if we're going to do Kosen Rufu, we got to understand the source for what it is. Okay? So that we can express it. Okay, these are the caveats of what I'm about to say. It's what I tried ending last meeting, or starting last meeting with, was the fact that, you know, we're at a different age now, okay? And there's a manner of approach that is appropriate with the time. And that is what we're trying to accomplish right now. So, I'm going to start by reading to you something that I had open. You know, I have two copies of the orally transmitted teachings. I have 2 copies of Lotus Sutra. I have 2 copies of the dictionary. So sometimes I get a little confused because I've got stuff in one of the 2 copies. They're not all together. Okay, so I've been wanting to read this to you to make the beginning point very clear. The 1 chapter and 2 halves. First of all, again, I have no relationship with Shakyamuni Buddha. Now that's for each of you to decide what you want to decide, but I'm quite certain I have no relationship with Shakyamuni Buddha. I am a bodhisattva of the earth, period. I came here to do Nichiren's Buddhism. All right? So I have no problem saying what I say with no fear. Okay? Because my life has already validated to me that I don't need to have any. And Daisaku Ikeda has then encouraged me even further. Do not fear anything. You're a Buddha. Okay? So, let me read the definition of the 1 chapter. Do you guys know what the 1 chapter and the 2 halves are?
Yep.
Okay, you know the expression of the term, but you know the significance of it. Unless you read the dictionary definition, you will not know the significance of it. Okay? So I'm going to read you the dictionary definition so that we understand the official significance according to the Gosho Translation Committee. Okay, 1 chapter and 2 halves. This is on page 472 of the Dictionary of Buddhism, the Soka Gakkai Dictionary of Buddhism. 1 chapter and 2 halves. The core of the Lotus Sutra, comprising the latter half of the Emerging from the Earth, 15th chapter, the entire lifespan, 16th chapter, and the first half of the Distinctions and Benefits, 17th chapter. This section reveals, Shakyamuni Buddha's original attainment of enlightenment. Okay, that's the significance, all right? Because that's Jigatoku Burai. You got it? Which is also the basis of our Buddhahood as it's been explained by the Daishonin. So let me just President Kate is going to get into this in the forward of the OTT also. It says, the core of the Lotus Sutra, comprising the latter half of the Emerging from the Earth, 15th chapter, the entire lifespan, 16th chapter, and the first half of the Distinctions and Benefits, 17th chapter. This section reveals Shakyamuni Buddha's original attainment of enlightenment. At the beginning, a numberless major world system, dust particle kalpas, right? At the beginning of the Emerging from the Earth chapter, the Bodhisattvas of the earth make their appearance, and Bodhisattva Maitreya, on behalf of the assembly, asks Shakyamuni who they are. The Buddha replies that they are his disciples whom he has been teaching since the time of his enlightenment in this Sahe world, although he alludes to having taught them since the long distant past. Okay? Unsatisfied, Bodhisattva Maitreya persists. How could Shakyamuni have possibly trained so many countless bodhisattvas in the mere 40-odd years since his awakening under the Bodhi tree? He implores Shakyamuni to explain further for the sake of future generations who may harbor doubts. To comply, the Buddha explains in the next chapter, Lifespan, that he actually attained Buddhahood, because what he's referring to initially is Sansen Jintingo, right? Okay, which is described in the Expedient Means chapter. All right, that's major world system dust particle kalpas, not numberless major world system. Okay, he says that he actually attained enlightenment in the unimaginably distant past. That's not Kuanganjo, but Goyaku Jintingo. No. Yeah, first one is Sansen Jintingo, and from the Expedient Means chapter. This now he's talking about Goyaku Jintingo. He actually attained enlightenment in the unimaginably distant past, what is known as numberless major world system dust particle kalpas in the past, and that since then he has always been in the world, in this world teaching the people. The first part of the distinctions and benefits chapter explains that the bodhisattvas and others who heard this revelation have all thereby received great benefits that will ensure their enlightenments. Tentai and Nichiren interpreted the concept of one chapter and two halves differently. Okay? So Tendai school would not view this the way I'm about to explain it from the standpoint of Nichiren's teaching. Okay? According to Tendai's interpretation, the latter half of the Emerging from the Earth chapter begins with Shakyamuni's statement that the bodhisattvas of the earth are his disciples whom he has been teaching since the long distance past. Hearing this brief statement, Tendai says, Shakyamuni's disciples have understood that his enlightenment occurred in the remote past. In the Lotus Sutra, however, this implication is followed by Bodhisattva Maitreya's second question. How could the Buddha have taught so many disciples in the short space of a few decades? Based on the sutra's text, Nichiren interprets this question as being asked for the sake of those who will come after Shakyamuni's death. Okay, it's not to the ones that are his disciples that he's preaching to and that will come in the middle day, former and middle day. Thus, Nichiren does not include Shakyamuni's initial brief allusion in his answer to this question, his statement that he has been teaching the bodhisattvas of the earth since the long distance past. In the latter half of the Emerging from the Earth chapter, or in the one chapter and two halves. In other words, Nichiren defines the one chapter and two halves as beginning with Bodhisattva Maitreya's second question, not his first question. That's the difference. He says this difference in the interpretations of Tendai's and Nichiren relates to the distinction Nichiren made between the Buddhism of the harvest and the Buddhism of sowing. Now, this is the whole point that Nikko Nikko obviously missed versus Nikko, Nikko, who, this is a translation of his, and they're completely, they're very, very different. Okay, so this difference in the interpretations of Tendai's and Nichiren relate to the distinctions Nichiren made between the Buddhism of the harvest and the Buddhism of sowing. Shakyamuni's reference to the Buddha, to the remote past in this chapter is intended to resolve the doubts of the assembly. That is, Maitreya and all the guys that have just now seen the bodhisattvas of the earth spring up, right? That is, it is a teaching directed towards Shakyamuni's contemporary disciples, and therefore falls into the category of the Buddhism of the harvest, the teaching meant to enable Shakyamuni's contemporaries to harvest the seeds of Buddhahood planted in their previous lives. In contrast, Bodhisattva Maitreya's second question is asked on behalf of those who will appear after Shakyamuni's death. In reply, Shakyamuni reveals his enlightenment in the remote past in the next chapter, Lifespan. According to Nichiren's interpretation, this revelation implies the seed of Buddhahood, or the cause that enabled Shakyamuni to attain enlightenment. That is the ultimate truth or law of life and the universe. Nichiren identified this law as Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, which enables all people to attain Buddhahood. Nichiren's one chapter and two half refers to the essence of the Lifespan chapter, or Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Where is that? Hidden in the depths of the Lifespan. It's not even possible for his contemporaries to come to this conclusion. This comes from everything that was passed on in that lineage. As Nagarjuna contemplated this, he wrote things. As it went up the line, Nanye then taught Tentai, Tentai then taught Chang'an, Chang'an then finally wrote it down. Okay? We can go on and go on and go on until it finally gets to Nichiren. All right? And there's a reason for that, because I'm going to read the Gosho on that right after I read this. He says, or Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the Buddhism of sowing, meant for people in the latter day of the law. in the object of devotion for observing the mind, Nichiren writes, and this is a very essential passage as far as I'm concerned, the essential teaching of Shakyamuni's lifetime and that revealed at the beginning of the latter day are both pure and perfect in that both lead directly to Buddhahood. Shakyamuni's, however, is the Buddhism of the harvest, and this is the Buddhism of sowing. The core of his teaching is the 1 chapter and 2 halves, and the core of mine is the 5 characters of the Daimoku alone. Okay, the core of my teaching is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo alone. So the core of Shakyamuni's teaching is in this Lotus Sutra. The core of the Daishonin's teaching is in Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. And the thing that this is supposed to try and teach us is that the answer to all questions is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay? And that everything exists for the purpose of the establishment of Kosen Rufu. Everything that's happening in the fundamental realm, you know, as much as it seems like there's wars going on and everything else, that's all culminating toward an environmental circumstance that's going to allow us to do widespread propagation. But for us to do widespread propagation, we have to understand what the teaching actually is. We can't understand what somebody said in a book we read 3 years ago. And it's got to be the way we live our lives, the way we view ourselves, because that's really what this entire teaching is about. You. This is all you. This is all each one of us. There's nothing in here that doesn't apply to all living beings. Okay? Do you get where I'm coming from? Okay, so then what this passage from the object of devotion also qualifies then is that Nichiren establishes the reality that I have a different teaching than Shakyamuni taught. Because I live in the 5th 500-year period. I live in Mappo, and his teaching was for when he was in the world and in the former and the middle of the day of law, and that's past. And I believe that for some weird reason, it's my destiny to reveal what I believe is the truth. And here we are, 800 years later. It's validated itself. Kosen Rufu, as he qualified, could occur from Little Mountain Minobu.
Yes.
It's too heavy. So, as a thus come one, I want to share this with you. All right, this is called the third doctrine. I expected I would be going right into this, into the OTT, but I realized a long time ago that this is a really important go show, and I've never shared it with you. Okay, so I've kept this like marked. You know, you see all these pieces of paper everywhere, and this is all for each one of you. Every time I'm reading, and I go, God, I can't get away. I haven't talked about this yet. So there's a whole lot of stuff I haven't ever even discussed with any of you. And I want to get this in because this qualifies, again, the Daishonin expressing the third doctrine. Now, what is the third doctrine? It's the sacred and correct teaching for the latter day. It's Nichiren Daishonin's Buddhism. It's the Buddhism of the sun. He's going to qualify now the third doctrine, and it's mentioned here. Let me go to again. I was looking at the threefold world because of what President Ikeda says in the foreword. I wanted to make sure that I hadn't forgotten what I thought, and I was correct. But then when I went to the threefold world, here's the threefold secret teaching before I read the Gosho, the third doctrine. So, threefold secret teaching. The threefold secret teaching. A doctrine Nichikan, the 26th high priest of Taisekaji temple established on the passage in Nichiren's treatise, The Opening of the Eyes, that reads, the doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life is found only in one place, hidden in the depths of the lifespan chapter. It's only found in Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, in the lifespan chapter of the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu were aware of it, but did not bring it forth into the light. Tentai Chi-che, alone embraced it and kept it ever in mind. Nichikan interpreted this sentence to mean that the doctrine of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, Buddhahood in your present form, is all found, 1, only in the Lotus Sutra, not in any other sutra. 2, only in the lifespan 16th chapter of the essential teaching latter half, not in the theoretical first half of the teaching, or the first half of the Lotus Sutra. And 3, only in the depths, not on the surface of the lifespan chapter. The first point corresponds to the comprehension of the true teaching, the Lotus Sutra, and the provisional teachings, all the other sutras. The second point corresponds to the comparison of the essential teaching and the theoretical teachings of the Lotus Sutra. The third point corresponds to the comparison of the depths and the surface of the lifespan chapter of the sutra, the former indicating the Buddhism of the sowing and the latter the Buddhism of the harvest. These 3 levels of comparison reveal the ultimate teaching of Nichiren, or the Buddhism of sowing, as being Nam-myoho Renge-kyo of the 3 great secret laws. Nichikan used the term threefold secret teaching because the Buddhism of sowing, hidden threefold in the depths of the lifespan chapter, was unknown to the other Nichiren schools. And that's why they might call Nichiren Daishonin Nichiren Shonin, because they don't perceive the fact that this is a new, for the age, teaching that supplements what preceded it, which was completely and only preparatory. Because Shakyamuni was in this world for, I don't know what it was, 70, 90 years, whatever it was he lived to be. The former day is 1,000 years. The middle day is 1,000 years. How long is Mappo? How long is the latter day? 10,000 years and beyond. So that gives you, it's forever. Okay? One is totally preparatory. The other one is the true teaching for until the sun supernovas or whatever. Okay? For Kosen Rufu. All right, so the third doctrine, page 854, volume 1. And I'll go to the background on page 857 first. This letter was written at Minobu in the 10th month of the 3rd year of Kinji to Toki Jonin, a leading figure among the believers in the Shimosa province, in response to Toki's report of his encounter to debate with Ryosho Bo, a prominent local priest of the Tendai school. In his reply, the Daishonin comments on the points raised in the debate and provides additional clarification for future reference. Evidently, Toki had gained an unexpected advantage in the debate when his opponent proved himself ignorant of a passage in Myolo's annotations on the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra to the effect that one cannot attain true liberation through the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings. This passage represents Myolo's annotation on another passage from Tentai's words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra, which in turn is commenting on a passage from the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra. In the first part of his reply, the Daishonin cites all 3 passages and explains their essential meaning. The pre-Lotus Sutra teachings, he says, are all expedient means preached solely in order to teach people to lead people to the Lotus Sutra, and the benefits of those teachings depend on the teaching of the sutra's lifespan chapter. So he's saying the purpose is to get them to the Lotus so they can get to the lifespan, so they can get to what? What's in the lifespan? Hidden in the depths. Yeah. What? What's hidden in the depths? Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So the Daishonin says it's to get them to the Lotus Sutra, to get them to the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra, where the truth is that can be revealed by his teaching. Do you understand? Because it's now the latter day of the law. He's already way into what he's talking about. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo isn't an unknown thing when he makes this statement to his disciple who is in debate with a Tendai priest. Okay? The Daishonin also draws on a traditional standard of doctrinal comparison, that of the teachings still in a certain dimension and the teachings extending beyond. To further illustrate this point, this comparison, he says, may be carried out on 3 levels. From the viewpoint of the third and final level of the comparison, even the essential teaching of the Lotus Sutra is considered to be a teaching still belonging to a certain dimension, while only the supreme law implied in the depths of the lifespan chapter is viewed as extending beyond. Do you follow? The great law, the great pure law. Shakyamuni, great law. 500-year period, and after that, it's the great pure law of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Still belonging to a certain dimension, while only the supreme law implied in the depths of the lifespan chapter is viewed as extending beyond. This third level corresponds to the third doctrine from which this writing takes its name. The third doctrine also indicates the supreme law, that is, the original seed of enlightenment, that I shown and revealed for the first time in the latter day as Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. So this is the teaching of Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. This third doctrine is the Daishonen's Buddhism. Do you follow? Okay, so let me read this to you, and then I'll get into the orally transmitted teachings. I have read through your letter. In it you report that you said the ninth volume of the annotations on the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra states, freeing oneself from the threefold world by means of the provisional teachings is termed an ephemeral liberation. What's ephemeral mean? Short-lived. Short-lived, okay? So short-term liberation. A liberation that does not last beyond this lifetime. Right? Do you understand? Okay. The only Buddhahood that you're going to experience over and over and over again is actual Ichinen Sanzen, because you're not people of the former or the middle day of the law. Do you understand? Aren't we all born after the 500-year period began, 900, 800, 900 years ago? Right. Okay, so freeing oneself from the threefold world. And what's the threefold world? That was what I went to go check to make sure I knew what it was. The threefold world is the world of desire, the world of form, and the world of formlessness. And if you studied what that is, you would think that, wow, it's a world of desire. That's where I live now. I'm trying to get to the world of form. That'll be like some sort of special place where I don't do anything wrong. And then I'll get to be like without a body and just float around. Because the world of formlessness is not, you're screwed because you can't. Okay, I shown in another Gosho says those people that missed the jewel of the world of desire, which is Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, will have to go all the way up the ladder to those other worlds of desire, or a world of form and formlessness, and then they come tumbling back down into the world of desire so they can be saved. Because you can't get to Buddhahood, eternal Buddhahood, unless you chant Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, frankly. Freeing oneself from the threefold world by means of the provisional teachings is termed an ephemeral liberation, to which the priest Roshobo replied, there is no such passage. Yet in the section that deals with the lifespan chapter, the 9th volume of On Words and Phrases does indeed say from the passage, there is no one who emerges from the ephemeral to the passage. The ephemeral teachings of the past were expounded for the sake of the truth, meaning that the text is that freeing oneself from the world by means of the provisional teachings is termed an ephemeral liberation. Do you follow what that's saying then? That's saying, again, you're not necessarily escaping permanently the 6 realms. Okay? You may not make it into the higher realms. You're not automatically going to make it back into the higher realms just because you made it into the higher realms from the provisional teachings, from studying the provisional teachings, right? You didn't get there from chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. Okay? There are no people of the three vehicles who have not freed themselves from the threefold world, and no human beings of the human and heavenly realms who have failed to escape the three evil paths. So what is that saying? There are no people of the three vehicles. Who are the people of the three vehicles? We're included.
Yeah.
Actually, we're way ahead of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Who are the people of the three vehicles? Voice hearers, cause awakened ones, and bodhisattvas, which are actually all what? Those are three components to what? Buddhas. He's saying anybody that's, again, freeing oneself from the world by means of the provisional teachings is termed an ephemeral liberation. There are no people of the three vehicles who have not freed themselves from the threefold world, okay, which is what they'd have to be on the path to Buddhahood, correct? You have to at least be a voice hearer. You have to at least have heard the name and the words of the truth, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And no beings of the human and heavenly realms who have failed to escape the three evil paths. What are the three evil paths? Hell, hunger, and animality, right? Yeah. Anger, asuras, I'm still a little bit okay. All right? Again, you have to escape the three evil paths to be able to get into the human and heavenly realms, which allow you to get to voice hearer, cause awakened one, and Buddha.
Yeah.
All right? This is a ladder. Even though everybody has the full ladder with every rung in it in their life. All right? Everybody's with me.
Yeah.
All right? Yet these are both termed ephemeral liberation, short-lived, temporary. The 9th volume of the Words and Phrases of Lotus Sutra reads, there is no one who emerges from the ephemeral and yet fails to enter into the true. Who emerges, that goes past that human and heavenly realm, gets into the three, you know what I'm saying? The three upper worlds. All right, there. And yet fails to enter into the true. Therefore, we know that the ephemeral teachings of the past, the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings, were for the sake of the truth, which isn't even revealed in on the surface of the lifespan chapter. It's still hidden in the depths. That's the truth. Do you understand? All right, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is the truth. This is a different teaching than Shakyamuni's.
Right.
That's what I'm really reading this for. The lifespan chapter states, good men, the thus come one observes how among living beings there are those who delight in inferior teachings, meager in virtue and heavy with defilement. Because living beings have different natures, I preach different teachings, is a quotation from the sutras. This, Buddha's work, I have never for a moment neglected. Tentai and Myolo are commenting on this passage. In this passage of the sutra, all the teachings from the Flower Garland Sutra, which was the very first thing he did from under the Bodhi tree, which was expounded immediately after the Buddha's enlightenment, and which combines both specific and perfect teachings, to the 14 chapters that comprise the theoretical teaching of the Lotus Sutra, all of that and everything in between are termed inferior teachings, because they don't lead to the truth. They don't lead to the truth of your life is eternally been Buddhahood that is the original state. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is Kuan, beginningless time. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is the original state. The original state is the central and equal component of all things. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is in those flowers. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is in that wall made of stone. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo is in my life. It's in my pets outside waiting for their treats after we're done. Okay? Those who delight in them, who delight in the inferior teachings, are called people meager in virtue and heavy with defilement. And the liberation achieved through them is shown to be an ephemeral liberation, which means that all those people that study all those other kinds of Buddhism and from Tricycle magazine are never actually going to attain Buddhahood. Okay? They're going to think that they're all hot shit, and they're going to know a lot of cool stuff, but
Right.
they're not going to be Buddhists.
Right.
And that will not pass on necessarily to their next life. It's dependent upon how they conduct themselves in the last moment of their life.
Right.
This being the case concerning the Flower Garland School, which relies on the Flower Garland Sutra, the Dharma Characteristics School, which upholds the Profound Secret Sutra, the Three Treatises School, which is based upon the Wisdom Sutras, the True Word School, which relies on the Mahavajrana Sutra, the Pure Land School, which cherishes the Meditation Sutra, and the Zen School, which upholds the Lankavatara Sutra, as well as all other various schools which rely on their respective sutras, even if their adherents read and recite the sutra their school relies on, just as that sutra teaches. They will neither free themselves from the threefold world, as I just said, the world of desire, the world of form, the world of formlessness, nor escape the three evil paths, which will keep them from becoming Buddhas in their present form as human beings. Even less will those who term these sutras true teachings, or who claim that they surpass the Lotus Sutra. They are like people spitting at the heavens or pounding at the earth in rage. With respect to this doctrine, after the passing of the Thus Come One in India for more than 1,500 years, the Buddha's 24 successors, such as Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu, knew of it but did not reveal it. In China for more than 1,000 years, others did not know of it. Only Tiantai and Yolo gave though others knew of it, others did not know of it. Only Tiantai and Yolo gave a rough account of it. However, it seems that they did not explain its true significance, and the same was true of the great teacher Dingyo. Now, when I, Nichiren, consider the matter, I find that, in addition to the above passage of the Lotus Sutra and Nirvana Sutra states, if there are those who possess differing ideas concerning the three treasures, then truly you should know that these people can no longer hope to take refuge in or rely upon the three pure treasures. They will never gain benefit from any of the precepts, and in the end they will fail to obtain the fruits of the voice hearer, the cause awakened one, or the bodhisattva. That's what all of that was talking about previously. To get to the point where you obtain the fruits of the voice hearer, that's when you lock in, and you can be assured that you will re-encounter it in your next lifetime. This passage is clearly referring to the essential point of the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra. When he talks about this passage is clearly referring to the essential point of the lifespan chapter, he's talking about Nam-myoho Renge Kyo. It subsequently likens the lifespan chapter to a tree, and the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings and the theoretical teachings to its shade. This appears again in the Nirvana Sutra. It is saying that the benefits of the 5 periods and 8 teachings, of the teachings that are still in a certain dimension and that extend beyond. That's all the teachings of Shakyamuni up prior to the perfect teaching of the Lotus and the Nirvana. And of the Mahayana and Hinayana, all of that are like shade. While the doctrines of the essential teaching is like a tree. And again, he's talking about Nam-myoho Renge Kyo specifically. It is also saying that the benefits gained from the teachings expounded before the lifespan chapter by those who lived during the Buddha's lifetime are like a tree's shade in the darkness. For such benefits were obtainable only by those who had already heard the lifespan chapter in prior existences, his disciples from his previous lifetimes. As for your opponent's contention, don't forget, he's the 16th son of great universal wisdom excellence. He's got brothers that are all out doing the same thing in the universe. As for your opponent's contention, that disbelief does not in itself constitute slander. That disbelief in itself does not constitute slander. Or his claim that those who disbelieve will not necessarily fall into hell. The 5th volume of the Lotus Sutra states, if with regard to this sutra one should harbor doubt and fail to believe, one will fall at once into the evil paths. On the whole, you should bear the following in mind. In contrasting the Lotus Sutra with the pre-Lotus Sutra teachings and evaluating their relative superiority and depth, the comparison between the teachings still is in a certain dimension, and those extending beyond may be carried out on 3 levels. Nichiren's teaching represents the third doctrine. Though the first and second doctrines have been spoken of in the world rather vaguely, like a dream, the third has never been spoken of at all. What's he referring to? Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Okay. The first and second are spoken of as only in a dream, or what? The teachings of the Lotus Sutra, theoretical and actual essential teaching. Okay. Though Tentai, Myolo, and Dingyo explained it to some extent, they did not clarify it fully. In the end, they left it for now the latter day of the law. This is the time referred to as the 5th 500-year period. However, I was given no information about this doctrinal debate. Roshobo is a person of vast learning. If he had remarked, "I am sorry to have to say this, but I am already well aware of the existence of that passage," and had somehow managed to frustrate you, claiming that our side had been defeated, I wonder what you could have done about it. Anyway, setting aside the fact that he and his fellow priests were ignorant of that passage of the commentary, his having said that it does not exist in any of the 60 volumes is due to the reprimand of heaven. His offense of slandering the correct teaching became apparent when he encountered an omission and when he encountered an emissary of the Lotus Sutra. Moreover, this affair of the debate surely occurred for some reason. Please find out in detail what Otojiro Hyoe of Kajima Daishinbo and the other chief priests of the main temples are saying. Matters such as these are described in detail in the sutra. The votary of the Lotus Sutra is certain to be obstructed by the devil king of the 6th heaven. Among the 10 objects of meditation, this corresponds to the object of diabolical functions. It is the way of the devil to delight in obstructing good and in causing the production of evil. Concerning those whom he cannot force to perform evil acts, he is helpless and is capable only of allowing them to create good. Those who carry out the practices of the 2 vehicles, he hates unreservedly. Those who carry out the practices of the 2 vehicles, he hates unreservedly. He urges them to perform a lesser good. Those who carry out the practices of the Bodhisattva, he hinders by encouraging in the direction of the practice of the 2 vehicles. And lastly, if there is someone who practices the pure and perfect teaching exclusively, he will topple that person into the perfect teaching that is combined with the specific teaching. You may refer to the 8th volume of Great Concentration and Insight. And there are little notations here on, as I've gone through this, if you ever read this Gosha, that'll explain all that. But he's really kind of giving the person that he wrote this to, which is Toki Jonin, he's given Toki a little bit of a hard time saying, I didn't know you were going to do this debate. And what if he would have answered in a different way? You wouldn't have known what to say, and I wouldn't have been able to help you in advance. Don't ever go into this kind of a situation again without making sure you've let me know so that we can make sure you're on the right page. Okay? And then he's gone on to explain everything so that, again, if that should ever occur, he's got the backup to it. All right? You may refer to the 8th volume of Great Concentration and Insight, which is Tentai. We're not going to do that. He says, you say that Roshobo further claimed that a practitioner of concentration and insight should keep the precepts. However, the 9th volume of Words and Phrases, Tentai, restrains practitioners of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of the 5 stages of practice from upholding the precepts. This is also clear from the text of the sutra itself. The discrepancy in the Great Concentration and Insight is explained by Myolo. The discrepancy in Great Concentration and Insight is explained by Myolo in the form of a question and answers, and this is all referenced. The volume 9 of Words and Phrases, there are 2 kinds of practitioners at the initial stage of rejoicing. Practitioners of keen faculties may keep the precepts, while those of dull faculties are restrained from doing so. Moreover, there are differences among the former, middle, and latter days of the law, and the differences between the practices of shoju and shakabuku. You should also take into account the great teacher Daimyo's remark about a tiger in a marketplace. Anybody still doing precepts would be very strange. That's what that quote's about. From now on, you need not hold debates in Shimosa. Having defeated the priests Roshobo and Shininbo, were you to debate with others, it would only dilute the effect. I hear that these priests have been slandering me for some years now. Those mosquitoes and gadflies, as it were such fools that they groundlessly revile Nichiren, who is like the Lion King, when they have neither listened to nor seen him. For persons of the Tendai Lotus school to chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo themselves and yet give their approval when others repeat the Nembutsu would be strange enough. Yet not only do they fail to remonstrate with them, but they criticize one who does confront the Nembutsu school, which is strange indeed. As for Daishinbo, as I wrote you before, please strongly admonish him by letter. It would appear that he has been brought back to our faith by the 10 demon daughters. It would also seem that a messenger from the Devil King had possessed him, but now he has parted his company with him. It cannot possibly be a lie when the sutra states that devil demons will take possession of others. There is much that I would like to say, but the messenger is in a hurry, so I am writing this at night. With my deep respect, the first day of the 10th month. Okay, so that's that Gosho. The point that I wanted to make in reading that Gosho was to share it with you, number one, and to qualify so that you understand this is not an extension of Shakyamuni's teaching.
No.
Okay? It is a completely different teaching that is appropriate to the time, to the age, the latter day of the law. Okay? That was the most important thing for you to understand. The other thing is that, we are not, or at least I'm not, a disciple of Shakyamuni Buddha. I'm a disciple of Nichiren Daishonin. And subsequent to that, I'm a disciple of Nikko Shonin. I'm a disciple of Nichikan Shonin. I'm a disciple of Nitatsu Shonin. I'm a disciple of the 3 founding presidents.
Right.
Okay? I'm a disciple of all of them. Okay? Now let's go into the OTT. All right, I'm going to read you the foreword. I said I wasn't going to read anything else from President Ikeda, and I've already read The Life of Nichiren Daishonin before. It's one of our previous videos. It's in 2 videos. I'll put that link in after we get done with this. Everybody good to go?
Yep.
All right, it's already 5 o'clock. I'm only going to read for about 20 minutes, and then I'm going to have to pause because she's got to get out of here for a meeting.
Okay.
All right? So, here we go. This is on page 9 in Roman numerals at the very front.
Okay.
All right? Where it says forward. This is from Daisaku Ikeda. And thank you for enduring through all of that preliminary stuff that I just went through. 'Cause I felt it's important for you to understand that unequivocally before I go, because otherwise you're going to hear me say some stuff and you're going to go, whoa, dude,
Yeah.
you're getting out there. And I'm telling you, I'm not getting out there. You need to get out there. All right?
Okay.
We're all Buddhists exactly as we are. It's time we must live as that.
Yes.
Yes.
I view with the greatest pleasure the publication of this English translation of the Angikuden, or the record of the orally transmitted teachings, by Dr. Burton Watson, a translator of world renown, for it will introduce to the world at large the essence of East Asian Buddhism. Dr. Watson is widely known for his deep understanding of Chinese literature and his translations of Sima Qian's records of the historian and of Chinese poetry. We first met in 1973. I had for some time thought of him as the most suitable person to undertake a translation of the Lotus Sutra. And I expressed the hope that he would one day gratify us with a translation done from Kumarajiva's Chinese version of the text. I was, of course, aware that there were already a number of English translations of the sutra. My hope, however, was that he would produce a translation marked by stylistic beauty, one that would do justice to the literary qualities of the text, and at the same time be easily understood by readers not already familiar with Buddhism. Dr. Watson, having agreed to my proposal, fulfilled his promise 20 years later with the publication of his translation of the Lotus Sutra. It has proven a major event in the history of the world Buddhism, a powerful beacon to light the future of humankind. This is it. All right? It was published in 1993. In 1992, continuing on page 1X or IX, Roman numeral 9. In 1992, the year before Dr. Watson's translation of the Lotus Sutra appeared, I met with him again, and we talked about the Angikuden, which is the record of the orally transmitted teachings. We talked about the Angikuden, which embodies Nichiren's comments on the Lotus Sutra. Dr. Watson, who by this time had completed his translation of the sutra itself, expressed a deep interest in the manner in which Nichiren interpreted the Lotus Sutra. Aware of the many problems involved, he agreed nonetheless to undertake an English translation of the Angikuden as well. Okay? Now, why is he talking about aware of the many problems involved? There's only one school that has the Angikuden. Nichiren Shoshu. It's from Nikko. The Angikuden is a recording of Nichiren's lectures. It's not written by Nichiren. This is written by Nikko Shonin. Okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and there are other Nichiren schools that say it's baloney. It's made up. It was made up by Nikko. Nichiren never said that. Shakyamuni Buddha is still king, whatever. All right? Aware of the many problems involved, he agreed nevertheless to undertake an English translation of the Angikuden as well. Now, a fitting adornment to his long career as a translator, his translation of that text is being published. I am confident that it will open up to the world the profound philosophical teachings of Buddhism and act as a joyous revelation to all humankind. Numerous persons throughout the world who seek a deeper understanding of Buddhism have heard of the Angikuden, but only a few have had a glimpse of its contents. Like me, for my whole practice up until the publication of this. I wanted to read the Angikuden as soon as I heard that such a teaching existed, but you couldn't get your hands on it. It didn't exist. It was only in Japanese. It wasn't taught by anybody that wasn't Japanese. There were no senior leaders from SGI USA quoting the Angikuden. Okay? Trust me. That's why I said this is my treasure. This answered all the questions I had not been able to answer on my own. All right? Numerous persons throughout the world who seek a deeper understanding of Buddhism have heard of the Angikuden, but only a few have had a glimpse of its contents. Many have expressed a strong desire to learn more about the text and have long wished for an English translation. On the occasion of the publication of this translation, I would like to say here to say a brief word about my own understanding of the Angikuden. As I recall, it was August of 1962 when I began a series of lectures on the Angikuden designed for college-level students who were members of the Soka Gakkai. I wanted to train future leaders of the movement and to make the profound philosophy of Nichiren accessible in contemporary terms. It's the latter day of Allah, folks. Yes. It was a time of nuclear armament, an age engulfed in hatred and mistrust, and I felt there was a deep need to replace these with a humanism based on mutual trust and harmony. And that's why I'm trying to propagate it now. It's time. Generally speaking, Buddhism is viewed as an exploration of the inner world of the individual, focusing mainly upon meditation and observance of religious precepts or rules. And in fact, has largely ignored the question of how these inner concerns of the individual can be applied to the outer world of society as a whole. Therefore, few people perceive Buddhism as a philosophy for the attainment of world peace. Get it? What is the purpose of Buddhism? Actually, to establish world peace, because it all culminates in this. It all culminates in Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo culminates in Kozen Rufu. All right? Nichiren, however, as he demonstrated in his famous work on establishing the correct teaching for the peace of the land, which we just got finished studying in depth, postulated a fundamental truth or principle that a revolution beginning within the inner being of the individual can then bring about a similar revolution in the world at large. Basing himself on the Lotus Sutra, Nichiren did not look to some external being, such as a Buddha or the gods, as the source of his revolution in the individual and in society, of this revolution in the individual and in society. Instead, he perceived a law or truth that permeates both the inner being of the individual and the life force of the universe at the same time, as a whole, and sought to open up and disseminate an understanding of that truth. But this concept far transcended the ordinary thinking of the age in which he lived, and as a result, as the Lotus Sutra itself had predicted, he could not fail but encounter numerous grave difficulties. And indeed, the fact that he endured such difficulties in the course of propagating the sutra was proof of the correctness of its teachings, and at the same time evidence that he was, as it were, reading the Lotus Sutra with his whole being, that he was a true votary of the Lotus Sutra. And so am I. In the latter years, when Nichiren retired to Mount Minobu, and so is President Keita, obviously. In later years, when Nichiren retired to Mount Minobu, he delivered a series of lectures on the Lotus Sutra for the instruction of his disciples. He revealed the hidden meanings of the sutra passages that were so familiar to him, the meanings that earlier authorities on the sutra, such as the great teacher Chentai and the great teacher Myolo, had not fully brought to light. Nichiren, utilizing the work of these earlier commentators in his own lectures on the sutra, proceeded to make clear these hidden meanings, just like Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. His lectures were recorded and compiled by Nikko, one of his closest disciples, who had been with him since he was a 16-year-old acolyte and had gone with him everywhere, from the Izu exile to Sato Island to Mount Minobu. Nikko, shown in Nikko, was always with Nichiren. Nichiren gave his approval to the work, whose completion is recorded as the first day of the first month of the first year of the Koan era, which corresponds to the year of 1278. It later came to be known as the Ongikuden, or the record of the orally transmitted teachings. The charge is often made that the Lotus Sutra, though abounding in highly vivid similes and parables, lacks philosophical content. If we look only at its surface meaning, we may perhaps agree with such an opinion. And when I read it to you someday, it's very clear. We've already read that. But Buddhism customarily applies three approaches in interpreting its writings. Examining them first from the standpoint of the words of the text, then from that of the ideas or meaning implied by the words, and finally from that of the underlying purport or purpose of the work. Going to page 12 now. XII, Roman numeral 12. Chinese authorities on the Lotus Sutra, such as Tiantai and Miaolo, by pondering the words of the sutra, had derived from them certain subtle ideas or doctrines which they described in terms such as the mutual possession of the 10 worlds, 3,000 realms in a single moment of life, the attainment of Buddhahood in the remote past, opening the near and revealing the distant, or the replacement of the 3 vehicles with the 1 vehicle. These are all core teachings of Buddhism that we practice, the Buddhism of the sowing, are they not?
Yeah, they are.
Where do they come from? From the Buddhahood interpretive ability of Buddhas reading Shakyamuni's words as they had been left and translated and finally encountered in China. Okay, that's why we come into Kumara. I said last week, or the last time we met, the whole thing about Kumara Jiva, okay, being the only real known source of where we are right now. We don't know exactly what actually Shakyamuni, whoever he might have been, has said specifically. Okay, we do know what Kumara Jiva recorded, and everything else that stayed consistent since then. So he says, the record, Nichiren in his lectures on the sutra revealed the purport or heart of the work is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay, so what's the heart of the Lotus Sutra? You remember what were we reading in 2015 when we first videos ever started? It's right behind you. Pardon me. It's right here. Okay.
Oh.
It's the heart of the Lotus Sutra. What is the heart of the Lotus Sutra? Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Okay. Nichiren in his lectures on the sutra purported the purport or the heart of the work is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and from that standpoint he proceeded to give his explication of the sutra as a whole. So explication is not an explanation. An explication qualifies why something is what it is, rather than what it is. Not just what it is, but why it is what it is. Okay? All right. So this may be termed an interpretation based on his observation of the mind, his own Buddhahood, his own enlightenment, or the inner truth implicit in the text, and it constitutes a philosophy of profound depth. Nichiren, in effect, infused new life into the Lotus Sutra. The record of the orally transmitted teachings begins with an explication of the term Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. It then proceeds to cite key passages in each of the 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra. In some cases, first introducing quotations from the commentaries of Tentai or Miaolo on these passages. In other cases, proceeding directly to Nichiren's interpretation, which, as mentioned earlier, is based upon his observation of the mind. So again, this is Nichiren's Buddhahood that's being expressed here. The work concludes with the commentary on key passages from 2 short sutras, the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra and the Universal Worthy Sutra, that have traditionally been regarded as prologue and epilogue, respectively, to the Lotus Sutra. In all, orally transmitted teachings contains commentary on a total of 231 passages. Furthermore, there are 2 additional sections. What is the basic philosophical outlook of orally transmitted teachings? Various interpretations are possible, but in my view, President K is saying, but my view is that ultimately it resides in the concept of the dignity of the human being and the dignity of life. In specific terms, it is the belief that ordinary people are capable of attaining Buddhahood, that ordinary people are in fact Buddhas. In most religions, human beings are relegated to a level quite inferior to that of the sacred being or beings of the faith. But in a religion like Buddhism, whose basic mission is to elevate men and women to the highest plane of spiritual attainment, human beings are referred to rather as children of the gods or children of the Buddha, terminology that reflects the religion's very reason for existing. This fact is most clearly indicated in the following passage from orally transmitted teachings. In the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra, Shakyamuni Buddha reveals that he attained Buddhahood in the far distant past. It has been immeasurable, boundless, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, millions of nayutas of kalpas, he explains, since I, in fact, attained Buddhahood. Jiga Tokaburai there. Ordinarily, ordinarily one, of course, would take I in this utterance to refer to Shakyamuni himself. But Nichiren declares that I refers to the living beings of the Dharma realm, to each and every one in the 10 worlds. He is saying that all beings in the 10 worlds of existence have from the beginning been Buddhas. One might suppose that this is a statement of mere abstract principle. But Nichiren goes on to say, now Nichiren and his followers, who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, are the original lords of teaching, are the original lords of teachings of the lifespan chapter. I've read that to you guys many times. That is anyone who chants the Daimoku, regardless of who that person may be. Excuse me. That is, anyone who chants the Daimoku, regardless of who the person may be, can conceive that he or she has, from the beginning, been a Buddha. In this way, he demonstrates the concrete application of his earlier statement. And the fact that the teaching qualifies that when you say you're the Buddha, you're not being arrogant, you're expressing your faith in the teaching. Thus, in a simple and straightforward pronouncement, he states the principle that ordinary people are identical with the Buddha. They're identical with him. This view of human beings is one of the most outstanding characteristics of orally transmitted teachings. But then there is the problem of human suffering. It would not be too much to say that all human life is, in a sense, a battle, a trial of endurance. Sahi world, the world of endurance. As Tolstoy has written, all happy families are alike, but an unhappy family is unhappy after its own fashion. In life, we are buffeted by a veritable storm of troubles, the death of kin, pronouncements of incurable illness, bankruptcy, job loss, dissension in the family. This is the true nature of life. And for that reason, people turn to the teachings of the Lotus Sutra in hope of finding some safety in the midst of such realities, for the peace and security in their present existence that the Lotus Sutra promises. But if such ills condemn human beings to unhappiness, then we will have to conclude that the happy human being exists only exists in fantasy. Nichiren himself lived a life marked by repeated troubles and hardship. Twice condemned to exile, faced with execution, attacked by warriors and ruffians, subjected to abuse and slander. Again and again, his very existence was in danger. His was a life far removed from peace and security, from the peace and security described in the Lotus Sutra. And for that very reason, many people doubted that Nichiren was in fact the kind of votary of the Lotus Sutra who faithfully carries out the sutra's injunctions. In his lectures on the Lotus Sutra, Nichiren, viewing the course of his own life and pondering the harsh realities of human existence, declared, "You should understand that when one practices the Lotus Sutra under such circumstances, difficulties will arise, and these are to be looked on as peaceful practices." Such a statement would at first glance seem to contradict the Lotus Sutra itself. But rather than being a conclusion that contradicts the Lotus Sutra, it is one that brings to light the true meaning of the sutra, a meaning that lies deeper than the mere surface words of the text. Pardon me. From his words, we learn that happiness means not the absence of troubles, but rather the refusal to be defeated by them, which is the true definition of happiness. Nichiren goes on to state, the Nirvana Sutra says, the varied sufferings that all living beings undergo. All these are the thus come one's own sufferings. And Nichiren declares that the various sufferings that all living beings undergo, all these are Nichiren's own sufferings. He announces that he will carry out an act of great compassion, sharing the sufferings of all beings and rescuing them from these sufferings. Thinking not of himself alone, he expresses a fervent desire to bring happiness to all human beings, showing through his own being the true way for a Buddhist believer to proceed. I would like to call attention to Nichiren's comments on the Bodhisattva Never Disparaging chapter of the Lotus Sutra. The example of patience and perseverance that this Bodhisattva represents, the power of a law that seeks to save both believers and maligners alike. His practice of paying honor to the Buddha nature present in all beings as he simply went about bowing to people. All this is a concrete demonstration of the belief that all people are capable of attaining Buddhahood. And Nichiren adopts the same practice as his own, developing it into a compassionate struggle to save all humankind through Kosen Rufu, or wide propagation of the teachings. Nichiren believed that the heart of Shakyamuni Buddha's lifetime teachings lay in the Lotus Sutra, and that the heart of the Lotus Sutra's practice lay in the Never Disparaging chapter. In one of his letters he writes, "What does Never Disparaging's profound respect for people signify? The purpose of the appearance of in this world of Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teachings, lies in his behavior as a human being." This letter, which I believe is the Three Kinds of Treasure or something like that. This letter, which resounds with praise for the humanism of the Buddhist doctrine, stresses that the truth of Buddhism is to be found not in the words of the sutra alone, but in the Buddha's aims as they are revealed in his actions as a human being. Bodhisattva Never Disparaging bowed to persons of all kinds in order to awaken them to the reality that all possess the Buddha nature within themselves. In doing so, he gave expression to boundless courage and a faith that could not be shaken. Nichiren, in his comments on the Never Disparaging chapter, lists 14 ways in which one could look at the act of bowing in obeisance performed by the Bodhisattva as he went about bowing to people. In one of these, he says, it is like the situation when one faces a mirror and makes a bow of obeisance. The image in the mirror likewise makes a bow of obeisance to oneself. Here he is pointing to the highly important moral principle that appears to be lacking in modern society, namely a spirit of mutual trust and mutual esteem, one that understands that when you show respect for others, they will show respect for you. The principal cause for this sense of alienation that besets human beings in our present-day society is egotism. This is the conclusion reached in the discussion I held some years ago with the historian Dr. Arnold Toynbee. And now is one... And how is one to overcome this attachment to egotism? From the Buddhist point of view, it is to be accomplished by ridding human beings of their self-centeredness, of what Buddhism terms the fundamental darkness that enshrouds their lives. This is ignorance, a lack of awareness of the true dignity of their existence, or of the fact that their own lives are embodiments of the wonderful law, and that they themselves from the beginning have been Buddhas. And what can wipe out this ignorance is firm faith, a faith that never doubts that the Buddha nature within all people and all women, never doubts the dignity of their inner beings. The engendering of such faith is now humankind's greatest need, is it not? An organization of people who are spreading Nichiren's philosophy of peace and life, and who share its doctrines and ideals, exists at present in 190 different countries and regions of the world. The solidarity of men and women who are awakened to the true dignity of life will come to expand and make it possible that war and terrorism be wiped out, and that poverty, destruction of the environment, and other global problems that now threaten humankind be solved. I firmly believe that day will come, and my one great desire is that it may come as quickly as possible. In closing, I would like to express my own heartfelt wish that readers will find in this book a fountain of inexhaustible wisdom, and that it will enable them to live lives filled with boundless courage and hope. Thank you, President Gata. And with that, I will now stop for today.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.